Hello and welcome to another life lesson from an emotional awareness expert. And today I want to talk to you about judgment. And this is going to be a little bit different than how most people discuss judgment. It's helpful for everyone, but especially for those who suspect they may have neurodiversity or people who have had a particular judgment thrown at them repeatedly throughout their life. And so let's have a look at what the word judgment is, and then we'll talk about how this can actually be very helpful to tap into. So judgment is trying to make a decision emotionally and kind of intellectually about how you feel about something or someone, and you don't know the correct terms or the correct ways to describe it. So you might make a judgment about somebody walking down the street about they look a bit strange, or they walk funny, or they talk funny, or they dress funny. And you might make, there's so many judgments we can make in this world, like the possibilities are endless. It might be about the design of a car that drives past. It might be a judgment about a family member and the way they behave. But what it is, this judgment is trying to form a way of describing something that you don't understand. And the same when other people make judgments about us, is that they're trying to describe things that very often they don't know how to explain. And they can only explain them in the terminology they know. And that is, well, you do that in a bit of a peculiar way, or why do you always do it that way? Or why do you always talk so much? Right? Some people might just go, oh, do you know what? I like talking to you. You're really chatty. And somebody else might go, you really do talk a lot. Right? So different people will make the same judgment in different ways as well, depending on their preferences. Somebody might compliment the way I dress, or somebody else might say, well, you dress a bit strange, right? And not that today is, I'm wearing a rather oversized shirt, but I'm comfortable in it. But it's my choice. But at the end of the day, everybody has their way of putting into words something that they observe. And so this is the part that can very often be unhelpful. When you actually say something to somebody's face and they take it negatively. Now, if you say something to somebody's face and they take it positively, that's a compliment. And at the end of the day, what is the difference between a judgment and a compliment other than the way the other person takes it? And that can very often depend on how you deliver it and what the meaning is behind that judgment. So if you say, oh, I really like the way you dress, they're going to go, oh, thank you. They're not going to take that as a judgment or a negative, right? They don't. But when you say, you're dressed a bit strange today, it's like, well, who are you to make a judgment? And so it goes on. So judgments and compliments are very much the mirror of each other. But when judgments come at us that are not intended to be negative, but they're also not a compliment, and they're judgments that you get from multiple people in your life who don't know each other, who all make the same judgments about you, this is where I want to bring the lessons in today from an emotional awareness expert. Now, I, believe it or not, have an email saved on my computer with a page full of judgments that I wrote down that people have made about me ever since I was little. You fidget a lot, your eyes are shifty, you talk too much, right? Some people say, oh, you never sit still, or you're really creative and you're great at expressing yourself, right? So the same judgments come at me through compliments and observations depending on who they are. And the list goes on and on and on. Oh, you're really passionate about what you do is another one. While other people say, oh, you don't ever do an ordinary job, do you? Right? Again, it's the same meaning, just put from a different perspective, a different person. And so eventually, literally about 2 or 3 years ago, I sat down and thought really deeply about all of the things that people have said to me all of my life. Now, I have lived in 3 different counties. I've been in 22 different jobs and on to 3 different schools and a sixth form, so 4 different educational establishments. And I've still had the same judgments across the board. So when all of those people are making the same judgments about me, is it about them being judgmental, or is those judgments actually something I could learn from? And that's the bit I want to get across as a life lesson from an emotional awareness expert, and a lesson that I wish I'd learned years ago. So let me please pay this forward to you and hope it helps you much, much sooner than it helped me. So I'm writing all these judgments and compliments and negatives down, and some of them were quite hurtful, some neutral, some amazing. But when I wrote them all down and I took time to reflect on them, and I mean days, not just a few minutes, but I took days and sometimes weeks to reflect on these, I started to realize that, do you know what, there really is a pattern about who I am. But what was that pattern telling me? And that was when I relayed that against another list of things that somebody had said they don't like about me. And there was a list of 22 things someone said they don't like about me, but they all relayed to all of these other compliments and judgments and negatives throughout my life. And so I finally started to try and piece together what this all meant as an overall picture rather than individual comments. And overall, I went, there is definitely something here I need to look into. And I've raised two children. One of them was on the autistic spectrum, and I had looked at myself against the autistic spectrum, as well as my ex-husband, my daughter, other family members. We tried to look for where this pattern come from, and we'd identified autistic spectrum traits in a number of people in the family, but they weren't diagnosable as autistic spectrum. But for me, when we did all the self-assessments, I was nowhere near. It didn't fit me at all. We'd also looked at ADHD within the family, and it was kind of close for my son, but again, the autistic traits were much stronger. They were the obvious diagnosis, the one that he was diagnosed with at 8 years old. But again, nobody else in the family seemed to fully fit that description. But then coming back to that, there were some things in there that had been bugging me for years, but I'd never known how to put into words. And when I looked at this list that I reflected back on, I thought, I wonder, really? So again, I go to the internet and I search for ADHD, and it comes up with all this list of things about boys and behavior that is erratic, and thought processes and concentration and not sitting still and having outbursts of temper, and it went on and on and on. But I was like, none of it really 100% fit me. But there were some things there that kind of made sense, but it wasn't enough to say I have ADHD. And then I started to question a little bit further. And this is also the power of questioning those judgments, etc., but also taking your perception of that question a bit further. Then it suddenly twigged, I need to look for ADHD in women. Wow. As the search results came up on the page, on the internet, there was an entirely different set of traits. It kind of fitted with what it said about ADHD in boys, because that's the classic search result if you don't add anything other than ADHD. But when you looked it up in women, it came up with a completely set of traits, because we mask and we adapt and we almost chameleon into situations. And the traits that were coming up here actually identically matched that list of 22 things that I had that somebody didn't like about me. Don't ask me to go into details about that today, because that's not the lesson we're learning. That's another story. But there was a perfect match. Somebody had actually over time picked up on and learnt to dislike all of the traits about me that were ADHD. Because I think initially they'd been quirky, they'd been fun, and then over time they just found them irritating and annoying. And yeah, me too. I have to live with them. I still have to live with those traits. But now the difference is, and this is the big difference it's made to me, instead of worrying about all the judgments that everybody else makes, and I still get them, instead, I can accept myself. I can now accept that these things that I struggle to change in life or to adapt or work around are actually a part of who I am. And I've got to stop trying to change myself to fit other people. And instead, I've got to find different strategies for working around who I am, not who everybody else wants me to be. And as I'm learning to accept myself, so other people are learning to accept me as I am. And it's finding those coping strategies. But if I hadn't sat down and looked at that whole list of judgments and criticisms and compliments all put together as a big picture from all the people across my whole life, then I wouldn't have come up with the answers that matched with actually me finding out I have ADHD too. So here I was trying to deal with now my own almost imposter syndrome after discovering this, as I learned to accept myself. But because I knew that what the process was, I'd been through this process helping my son with the autistic spectrum disorder, in learning to accept himself as he was and finding those coping strategies to help him fit into life as he was, not changing him to fit with other people. Right? And other people accepting him as he is now is just an unbelievable achievement, that he is so accepted as who he is. People just refer to him as a legend now. He just, if I even mention his name anywhere near where he lives, and people go, who? And then when I use his nickname, they go, oh yeah, he's a legend. And he's so well liked. Everybody just appreciates and values him because he's learned to be himself and accept who he is. And that's what I've been working on with myself. But obviously, being a mum, and being a housewife and being a career person all at the same time, I had not put myself first. And now I realize maybe I should have done. Maybe I should have put myself first a little bit more. So I hope that is a great lesson for you today, some inspiration to sit down and find a way to learn a little bit more about who you are if you're feeling lost, who you are if you're feeling unable to accept yourself, and how you can find out a little bit more about yourself, accepting yourself, and understanding that although some people in your life make these comments as a judgment, there are other people who make the same comments as a compliment. And it's up to you which ones you choose to accept as part of your life. I choose now to acknowledge that those who judge me are those who just simply don't understand. And that's not my problem. If they don't understand, that's not my problem, and I don't worry about it. But for those who do compliment me and accept me, yeah, I want to get to know those people better. Of course I do. And I want to understand where I fit in. Of course I do. But now I know and I understand myself a lot better. It helps. So once again, life lesson today from an emotional awareness expert on judgment and compliments. I hope you get to view all of your judgments and compliments with an entirely different light from here forward, and it all makes your life absolutely wonderful, inclusive, and happy. So hugs and healing from me for today. Bye bye.